For some people, BDSM is either going to give you two reactions, hell yeah or hell no. One person's yum is another person's yuck. It's kind of a wide spectrum in the community. I'm not a part of the community, but one person might consider rough, it might be considered pretty vanilla to some people. But the question I have for this episode is what happens when BDSM is no longer a kink and it's just straight up abuse? What is the thin line between BDSM and abuse? Well, the major thing is consent. In BDSM, consent, respect, trust are all very heavy. Everyone needs to be 100% consenting in BDSM. That's what makes BDSM not abusive. Unfortunately, there is a lot of people who use BDSM as a shield to be abusive. In 2003, we have these two different cases of women, and they're not related to each other at all, but they were in this BDSM lifestyle, and then later we find out that this wasn't even BDSM, this was straight up abuse, domestic violence, and even sex trafficking. Even though a lot of people on the internet still try and argue about these two different cases, that, oh, it was BDSM, it just wasn't. And today we're going to be discussing these two cases of these people where consent was no longer available and consent didn't matter. Hi, welcome to the Decomposing Flower podcast. I'm Jen. With me is Kira. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about two different cases that are very similar. We're going to be talking about Delia Day, who was a BDSM blogger in 2003, and we're also going to be talking about Ed Begleys and his female victim, who has remained anonymous. So we are going to be calling her Jane for this episode. Before we begin, I have to give some heavy trigger warnings. We are going to be talking about rape, violence on women, child abuse, SA, and torture. So please, if any of that is just too much for you and you feel like that's just not what you want to listen to, please check out another episode or take care of yourself, have some water, and we'll see you in another episode. Additionally, we also have links provided in our description for anyone who might be affected by abuse or sexual assault. If you need to check this out, please feel free to. All of our information is online. It's just gathered together for educational purposes, but if anything we say is wrong, incorrect about the case, or also the BDSM community, please feel free to let us know. All of our opinions stated are ours alone, and we are free to share them, but I kind of would like this episode to be more of a conversation about this. So if anyone wants to drop their own experiences about maybe if you're in BDSM, the good, the bad, or about the case, please feel free to. We love hearing your guys' opinions. And with that, we can kind of begin. But a little before, I want to kind of give a little quick crash course on BDSM. Now, I'm not going to be going into major detail about it. I'm just going to do the basics. I also want to say I am not someone who is in the community. So if I do say anything that's wrong or maybe is misinformation, again, just let me know. It's a little disclaimer of what BDSM is so we can kind of use it as a little bit of a reference when we talk about these two different cases. Honestly, personally for me, as long as you're an adult and you were all consenting, then I don't really care what you do in the bedroom. You don't have to ask for my permission. So I don't know if you've seen that meme that's like, he consents, she consents, is there someone you forgot to ask? And it's like a picture of Shrek or something.
Yeah, he's always right above the bed. He's watching.
Yeah, he got to ask Shrek first. BDSM stands for bondage, dominance, or discipline, sadism, and masochism. Typically, one person is going to be the dominant person, one is the sub, or more. Maybe if you want to have multiple people, you do you. Typically, people do a lot of different things, whether it is degrading, tying someone up, using physical harm, maybe role playing things like kidnapping. It's really a wide range of things. It's kind of a mixture of a bunch of different elements and aspects that people like to play around with. Some really like the idea of having control over someone, or maybe they like the idea of someone controlling them. So, whatever they're kind of into. So, like I said, BDSM is very strong with consent, respect, and trust with their partners. So, even if someone is doing something very rough or maybe very taboo, there is consent. For example, some people are into playing like role playing kidnapping, like I said, and it might seem very weird to some people, but obviously there has been consent previously given. Some people are really into that consent non consent, where consent, like I said, has been previously given, and that at that point it's no longer a crime. But that's why they have safe words. So, if halfway through they're like, hey, I don't want to be doing this anymore, they can kind of just be like, hey, Apple, and then they will stop. Also, I was looking up safe words for this episode, and Ben Stiller was one of the top words, and I thought that was so freaking funny. I just can't imagine being like Ben Stiller. That's awesome, actually.
Wasn't Christina Aguilera on there as well?
Yeah, she was. I think that's so funny. I guess it kind of works because when you are saying a safe word, you want that person to be pulled right out of it and be like, oh, okay, and they stop. Obviously, I'm not going to be going into the psychology behind BDSM or why people do this stuff. And, a lot of people have their own opinions on whether BDSM is actually healthy or if it's abusive. Personally, for me, like I said, it's not for me. You do you if that's what you're into. I'm not going to yuck your yum if that's what you're into. Anyways, I really wanted to talk very heavy on consent because that's where these cases kind of come into play and what happens when consent isn't even an option. Sometimes people in BDSM get pushed to their limit and they will say their safe word, or they might do the traffic light system. And even if someone has, done this type of stuff before, they're allowed to be like, hey, I don't want this anymore. It doesn't really matter how far along you are in your activities. If you're having sex, you could be like right at that climax. You can still be like, hey, I don't want this anymore. And that person has to stop. And if they don't stop, then they're just raping you. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there who use BDSM as this shield to rape, groom a lot of people and just use it for their own pleasure. And that's kind of what Ed Begley did. This guy was a straight up freak. I don't really like to just straight up call people that, but this guy was awful, and I do not feel bad for saying that. First of all, this motherfucker went by the username Master Ed online. I just think that's so cringe. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's giving cringe.
Yeah, and this guy was like in his late 30s. So,
Oh, brother.
yeah, so it's giving weird. It's giving not okay. So, yeah, he really loved BDSM, and he also had a thing for his son's girlfriend, who was a minor.
Oh my, just the cherry on top.
Yeah, just the cherry on top. He's Master Ed also wants his son's minor girlfriend. That's so crazy. I'm going to be referring to her as Jane since her identity has been concealed. So, unfortunately, Jane never really had it easy. She was in foster care. She was being bounced from home to home. And when she began dating this boy at school, I mean, I don't know if it was at school, I don't know where they met actually, but one day his parents had asked if she wanted to move in. Now, I don't know if she was still dating this guy at that point, but she had become very close to his parents, and they were pretty much like, hey, why don't you come live with us? And, she really did not like being from home to home, and she felt like this might be her way out. They began to kind of groom her in a way. They would buy her new clothes, they gave her her own room, and she was told that she would be protected, she was safe, and that she'd be perfect for modeling. So she moved into the trailer in December of 2002, and it's very important to understand how grooming starts. It usually starts by the perpetrator giving, the victim clothes or love bombing them and slowly gain their trust until the victim kind of believes this stuff is normal, or they might also feel like because they've been given all of these things that they need to kind of do whatever that person has done, and that's exactly what Ed had done. Jane said that Ed made her feel very pretty and special, and again, that's usually how grooming can start, especially someone like Jane who doesn't have family, doesn't have a strong support system. So, this guy literally started showing her hardcore porn when she was 15, 16, and it was like extreme, like BDSM, torture, and sadism. He even told her, you would love being a sex slave. All while she was just shy of turning 17. That's crazy.
Mm.
Yeah. Even his wife began to model BDSM outfits, and they began to give Jane ecstasy, weed, to kind of start to sexually abuse her. Jane became so twisted into this lifestyle that she actually viewed Ed as her boyfriend, even though, again, she is a minor. Mind you, even though she's 17, she might have been consenting to this idea at first, but she's a minor. By the time Jane was 18, she signed a contract to be a sex slave for life. Contracts can be used in BDSM, but you can't legally make someone your sex slave. It's not like if they break the contract, you can't just like take it to court and be like, this person doesn't want to be my sex slave. It's just kind of like the concept of this person owning you or you owning someone that gets people that thrill. And a lot of people in the community just say it's just like this kinky thing they do. But of course, you can say your safe word and then it's just broken. It's not a real binding contract. But of course, if you make that person feel like they can't leave, then that's just straight up abuse and is not okay. That's a crime. So Ed would begin by doing a lot of these BDSM activities with Jane, and he would drug her a lot to keep her awake or just to kind of rape her, maybe to entice her more into it, maybe to relax her, and I'm putting relax in quotations, but he was just awful. He told her that if she tried to leave, he would kill her. He even had shot her own animals
What
to
the
prove
fuck?
to her that yeah, to prove that he could kill her, just to gain more control. When she would cry or try to stop or even say a safe word, he would just escalate the torture, the abuse, and he had threatened to bury her alive. He even showed her a video demonstrating how he intended to do it and then bragged that he had killed people before. I don't know if he actually did kill people before. I don't think he did. I think he was just trying to say this to scare her. He also had given her this barcode on her neck, and he gave her a tribal tattoo with an S for slavery on her back, and also the Chinese symbol for slave on her ankle. So he would have her do these live sessions on the webcam where he would force her to perform for other men online when she was still a minor. Ed would straight up torture this girl. He would punish her by sewing her vagina closed. He would suffocate her with plastic bags. He would strangle her with rope, whipping her body. He penetrated her breasts with needles and skewers. He locked her in a dog cage. He was electrocuting her sexual organs with devices. He even waterboarded her, strapped her down for hours at a time with a homemade device that was a plastic toolbox with a motor and piston inside that was connected to a metal arm with a dildo attached. He had tied ball gags to her and he wouldn't let her be able to see or breathe. He even suspended this girl in a cage and would like electrocute this cage, all while he would take photos and videos during this time and share it online where he would brag about it. He would say things like, "Oh, I have this hot young sex slave who does anything for me." And he would offer her services to these other creeps online through magazines. And this is where a lot of these Johns would come from. In a way, he was basically Jane's pimp and she was his sex worker. And so let's kind of talk about some of these freaks. So there was Michael Stokes. He went by the name The Rodent. He was a 65-year-old man. I think him going by The Rodent is honestly a disservice to actual rodents, but it really does fit his vibe because he really was just this pest. He first became familiar with Jane when he had received photos of her online from Ed and was told that she was this sex slave and she had to do everything. And he had received photos of her where she had bruises and whip marks and was told that she could do a demo for him at his home. So Ed had forced Jane to go with him to visit Michael, where she was there naked with a dog collar on her neck. And then she would go on to have sex with Michael. And by sex, I mean she was raped. She would never say no to it because she knew she couldn't. And Michael was actually shocked by this. He was like, I'd never seen anyone have this much control over her or over anybody. And Jane, in a way, and this sounds like really degrading, but she was trained like a dog. She wouldn't fight back. She wouldn't do anything unless she was told to. She just wouldn't do anything. And they actually said that she was also a little bit mentally disabled. Now, I don't know how far mentally disabled she was. I don't know exactly, but they say like her mental age was kind of like 13. So that even adds to more of the disturbing elements to this.
I mean, certainly after all the abuse, there would be a lot of potential damage and psychological damage as well, with her kind of maybe receding into herself.
Yeah, exactly. That happens to a lot of victims where they'll like regress to a childlike mind as a way to cope. And that's like really normal, especially for victims like Jane, who has been abused probably majority of her life, but especially to this level. Michael would visit Ed's trailer around like 8 to 12 times to either participate or watch the abuse happen. His way of payment was either by bringing steak jackets, cards, lighters, cigarettes, or cash. A really weird range of payment. He had even watched Jane being tortured with electric devices that were clamped onto her genitals. He even gave money so Ed could make this sex device that would torture Jane. Jane was actually eventually forced to work at a stripper club where she could, be in a way, advertise for her work, and Michael even helped promote her. While Jane was working at the stripper club, she was told by Ed she had to be the top earner, and if she wasn't, she would be threatened and she also would be punished extremely if she wasn't making a lot of money. Michael had taken a lot of photos of Jane, and he even offered Jane $1,000 so she could have a BDSM photo shoot for the Taboo magazine in 2007. This magazine is out there. I'm obviously not going to show it. The pictures you do see, her face has been blurred, but still, it is so disturbing to know that she was on a magazine that she wasn't really able to consent. Now, at this point, I believe she was over the age of 18, but still, it's disgusting. And at the same time, this magazine, what was being shown, was very light and tame compared to what she was being dealt with. Now, one of these dancers had actually said that Jane bragged about her life as a sex slave and was proud of this photo shoot. But I do want to say that sometimes victims are so lost in the abuse that their only way to cope is by bragging or pretending they like it, or they do become so brainwashed into thinking this is their idea. They do like it. And sometimes people see value in their abuse. It's very complicated, and I mean, she was groomed and she could have been bragging out of fear for her life. There is a lot of reasons why some people might brag. Some people also might, they've been abused for so long that like she wanted to be a model. And so maybe she was like, I can't stop now. It's very complicated to know if she was bragging. Either way, even if she was bragging, that doesn't negate what was going on. There was a lot of other men. There was this 34-year-old man named Bradley Cook, who also went by a really cringe username, put her to good use. Literally the cringiest name ever. But Jane said he was honestly the most vile out of all of these men that she dealt with. When she would cry or beg him to help her or to stop, he would just laugh at her. Brad had began to watch these torture sessions online through webcams from 2006 to 2009. And he even traveled all the way to Missouri to watch and partake in these torture and rape sessions. He paid Ed by giving Ed these hard drives with extreme BDSM on it, which I'm assuming might have been a lot of rape. And mind you, this dumbass even said he knew that she was being abused and that this was the worst torture he had ever seen. And it's like, okay, then why were you partaking in it? Like, do you want us to feel bad for you that you were seeing this? You were also partaking in it. Then there's Dennis Henry. He was a 53-year-old post office worker. He actually would transport Jane across states for her to be raped and abused by other men. He also saw Jane get her genitals sewn shut, which is just, I can't even imagine that. That's just so awful. And he actually would visit Jane at the strip club. He engaged in a lot of the sessions for hours. And actually, Jane said he was one that she kind of trusted a little bit more. I don't know why she trusted him a bit more. Maybe she just felt like she could. And she actually had asked him if he could help her. And he actually snitched on her, which resulted in her being punished and tortured even more.
What a little rat.
Yeah, it's just awful. I can't imagine like having that courage to finally ask for help and then you're just punished for it.
Gosh. Just keeps getting worse and worse.
I know it feels like it just keeps going on and on. There just was all of these different men that she would have to encounter on the regular all the time. And during all this, Jane is also getting pregnant, and Ed would perform abortions on her and continue his own assault. And she could also die from these abortions. He's probably not giving her the proper care, and he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, it's just awful. So you're probably asking, like, okay, when does this kind of stop? So eventually, one day in 2009, Jane's torture kind of was too much, and she went into this cardiac arrest and was taken to the hospital. Ed tried to claim this happened while she was at the stripper club, but it was actually during one of their sessions where it was just too much for her, and her body gave out. But regardless if it was whether she was stripping or not, she was still forced into the stripping, so it didn't really matter. But this is where the abuse did eventually come to an end, because obviously the nurses and doctors could tell something was not right with her body. They could tell that she had all of these bruises and body modifications done to her. And so the police were brought in and they began to do their investigation. They went to the strip club that Jane had worked at, and right before this, Michael had actually destroyed all of his magazines, all of his photos, and any female contacts he had. But the FBI had already did their digging and they were able to catch these men. Jane had been a sex slave for 6 years, and thank God these men did get caught. During the trial, Ed tried to claim it was consent. Even his stupid ass wife tried to say it was consent because she said, "Oh, we all slept in the same bed and she was allowed to leave." And Marilyn has her own problems. She provided Jane for goods to these men. Like, she was like, "Here, you can rape this girl. We just want some steak," or something like that.
That's fucking wild. Like, she's a woman. She knows how much this hurts, and she sees a woman vulnerable, maybe, if she has a human conscience. Apparently not, though.
Yeah, and like Marilyn, she would later confess that she had only done this because she was also abused by Ed, and that now the abuse wasn't on her anymore. Now, this does happen to some victims where the abuse is no longer on them, so they will partake in abusing someone else with their abuser. That doesn't negate what happened and that doesn't make it okay, but that's still, like, to me, it's there does come a point where it's like you are a victim, but you also are a perpetrator, and two things can be true at once. I think it's an excuse, honestly, for her to try and act like she was not a part of it. Like, she was also modeling BDSM stuff to Jane when Jane was a minor. You can't tell me that, oh, I wasn't really that aware. Like, yes, you did. You knew what you were doing. So, during the trial, Dennis did apologize to Jane. So, Jane was, I guess I would say, okay. Like, she didn't die, but she obviously was very mentally and physically messed up. He did apologize to her. He said he didn't mean to cause harm, which I always find this so crazy. And people are like, "I didn't mean to cause harm." Like, what do you mean? You were watching this stuff happen to her, you were partaking in it. What do you mean you didn't mean to cause harm?
Yeah. Like, she would have been, what, maybe 25 at the time?
She was 23.
Oh, okay. 23 is way too young to have a heart attack, naturally.
Yeah, and they were all found guilty. So Michael, he pled guilty to sex trafficking by force, fraud, coercion, and he was only sentenced to 5 years without parole.
Less than what she was tortured for.
Yeah, like, literally, it's so stupid. And he also was charged for receiving CP because he was getting those images of Jane when she was a child. Like, these men should be in jail for life. But he was ordered to pay Jane $250,000. And Bradley Cook also was, he pled guilty. He also was charged with attempting to kill Jane and another victim, which I think is crazy. He also got 5 years. Dennis Henry also got 5 years without parole. And there was another man named James Knoll. He was also guilty, 5 years. This all happened, like, the trial happened between like 2011 to 2013. Ed's case didn't happen until 2013. He was found guilty, and he only pled guilty to one charge, which was using an interstate facility to entice a minor into illegal sexual conduct, which he first committed when she was 16. He was found guilty and was sentenced to 20 years, but just 20 years. Ed, Bradley, and Dennis will be forever supervised for the rest of their lives. They will all have a curfew for 10:30 p.m., which again, I just think like these men should just be locked up for life. Like what they were doing was straight up torture. And he tried to be like, "Oh, it was all consent. Like she was consenting." And even his wife was like, "Oh, we didn't have sex with her until she was 18." Yeah, everyone believes that. Like, okay, sure. So, Marilyn also, she wasn't sentenced because the court saw her as a victim for 25 years. So she was put on probation and she had like restrictions, but she actually failed these violations and these terms of her probation. And so she was sentenced to 4 years in jail without parole. So Jane was given $750,000 from all of these men, which would go towards her medical care, her counseling, and at the time when she received this all, she was just 27 years old. She even stated that Ed had pled guilty, but he didn't tell the truth. And then she went on to say, to the women trapped as sex slaves, you need to get out. They need to know life can get better. Save yourself. I really do hope that Jane was able to find some sort of peace and healing and find love that shows that she's more than just a sex toy, that she's more than a sex slave. And I just, honestly, I just hope she's doing okay. Like I know with something like this, it's not like you just go to therapy and then you're fine, but I really just hope that she's doing okay. We're going to be talking about Delia Day. So, Delia Day, her real name was actually Susan Anton, or Anton. I don't know how you say that. She was a photographer and an artist who went by the name Delia Day as like a stage name, a persona. But to make this easier, I'm just going to call her Delia. So, she was married to her husband, Travis, who was a programmer. They had 2 children, but they would send their kids off to boarding school because Delia had ran these 2 blogs. And her blogs were kind of the reason her kids were at this school because her blog and her lifestyle was very not safe for work. These are not things you do when you have children in the home. She ran 2 blogs. One was titled My Illustrated Life as a Sex Slave. She also had a live journal where she'd be a lot more personal, a little bit more not as edited, a little bit more of a chit chat rather than her other blog that was more of an art piece. So, in her main blog, she would write about being a BDSM sex slave to her husband Travis. Now, she only ever really referred to Travis as master or her owner. They would have this really hardcore BDSM lifestyle. Delia Day, the persona, was first curated in self-portraits on her site called Ideal Delia in the 90s, where she would explore a lot of themes of BDSM, bondage, restraint, control, but from this like artistic point of view rather than a fetish or a porn vibe. On her blog, My Illustrated Life as a Sex Slave, she would post a lot of stuff that would be like journal entries or articles with images surrounding her life as a sex slave. And it was very not safe for work, obviously, and it was like really hardcore BDSM. She would share anything from her tattoos, her piercings, her body modification. It was kind of a spectrum from what you could see. She would have written about so many things that would happen, what they would do. She would say it wasn't just like tying someone up, it was really extreme stuff that borderlined on pain. He had even threatened to cut off her clitoris or also circumcise her.
Oh,
And I know people are into BDSM. I know people are into pain, but to me that's just no. That's a lot for me. I feel like how is that fun for you if you can't even feel anything? And that's also just a lot, but
did she ever report what her body modifications were?
oh, I feel like she did. There was a lot of pictures. I didn't see all the pictures. I think she had a lot of like piercings on her genitals, like a lot of holes, a lot of stuff like that.
Oh, I'm sorry you had to see that.
Yeah. Well, I didn't see that picture. I didn't see that. I saw some pictures, but there was a lot of what people have said and stuff online and just from like the what is it called? Like the archive?
The Internet Archive?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, where you can kind of see some of it. So she wrote about how, like, she kind of was like pretty poetic. She wrote about how she was a country that was losing a war and that it sucks to lose. And, she would say how her master would cut her, he would bruise her, he would brand her. He had given her this tattoo that was like a collar around her neck. That was a permanent vow that she was his sex slave. And she would go on to be like, hey, I really like this lifestyle. This is what we do. It wasn't just in the bedroom, though. It was also in her everyday life. It was things like asking to cross the street. But to her outside friends or family, no one really knew they had this lifestyle. They were kind of this, what you would consider like this normal family. So when you would go on this site, it would say, this website is a documentary work of my life as an owned sex slave. This is not a porn site. This is real. And her blog was kind of like a Patreon where you could pay like $8 a month and it would unlock a lot more content. Now, her blog was very popular. It wasn't just like a blog that people saw, and it was really well respected by those in the BDSM community. This is also the early 2000s, and so people didn't have like a lot of places to go to, at least I don't think they did, to kind of talk about these things. She had even written about how she had received over 30,000 online visitors on her site in one day. So people really liked them. They would talk about how they were couple goals, they were like this BDSM model for relationships, and people would kind of begin to do a lot of body modifications because of the stuff that they would talk about. Everything seemed perfect in her life, and she would constantly write about how like she loved this. So in December of 2003, she had actually written a post called Locked Up Tight. In this post, she talked about how her husband had, almost in a way, he wasn't really talking to her, and he went to a bedroom without communicating to her. She wasn't really sure what was going on, but he had come back and he demanded that she stand up and that she takes off her pants, and he was holding this big brass padlock in his hand. She then wrote about how he had inserted these several brass barbells through the holes in her labia and that she had from piercings. This was really painful for her. She said no matter how she walked or moved, it was just so painful. And he apparently was wanting to do this for a long time, that he liked the idea of her being in pain. Now, this isn't really out of the ordinary. This was stuff that she would write about. She had written plenty of stuff like this before, and she would constantly write about, consent. And a lot of people in BDSM do like pain, but she was consenting to all of it. And she had actually written in her live journal about how he was this caring man, and that if he didn't do any of this, that he would seem like he didn't love or care for her. So she really liked this lifestyle. But after this post, the blog would go silent and there would be nothing. There was no response from Delia, there was no updates, nothing was coming onto either of these blogs. And a lot of people were confused because they were like, where are they? Like, did something happen? Until someone had begun doing some sleuthing and they actually found an article from where she was located that talked about a husband being shot by his wife. So hours after this blog post had happened, Delia had actually called the police and told them that she had shot her husband in the chest. When she was arrested, her blog had went offline because it was used as evidence. She went on to tell the police that she shot her husband out of self-defense, and there isn't really a whole lot on what happened during this because this wasn't really a murder case. It was actually more of a self-defense case, and she was found not guilty of killing her husband out of self defense. Her blog was one of her main defenses that she was able to use, but nobody knew this had happened. Again, she was completely silent on her blog, and she never went back to that blog. She never gave a goodbye, she never dropped a warning. She was just gone. So there were a lot of theories of what had happened. Some people had theories that she had killed him by accident, that maybe there was a gun during one of the activities that was loaded and she panicked and lied that it was self-defense and used the blog as a way. Some people actually thought maybe she really was a sex slave and this is how she got out. Others believe that she just shot her husband and was just straight up lying and just wanted to kill him. And then others thought that maybe she was just being abused and this was her way out and that she kind of snapped. So after this had happened and she was free, she actually ended up moving. She tried to take back a lot of her privacy and she began to work a normal job and she never returned. Her audience, again, they were just so confused of what had happened. And, they really liked them. Like, they were like, what went on? So, for 2 years, there was silence from Delia until there was this blogger who had been investigating this. And she apparently had received an email from Delia saying she wanted to come forward and say that every post on the blog was actually written by Travis and not her. But when this blogger tried to ask for more questions, she never responded. And there really is no way to fact check if this really was her, because this could have just been, someone having fun and just trying to make something up. So the entire situation became this internet mystery. Why did she disappear? Why did she shoot her husband? So then there was this other blogger, and she had written about this mystery, and she had said that she believed that Travis was the one behind Delia's account and that Delia was being abused. So Delia had actually commented on this blog in 2013 and she confirmed this theory, saying that Noelle was correct and she was wondering if anyone had ever noticed that Delia's writing was not her own. She then went on to say that only I don't know how to say this word, Choctaw County Sheriff's Office that was in possession of all of the evidence, including the computers, had actually seemed to realize that her writing and his writing were completely different. And she did have a new blog that was called Invisible Survivor, which is no longer available. I don't know if she just took it down. So she had shared new photos that people could see was her based off the neck tattoo. And they had Google searched this image and it wasn't posted anywhere. And they could see that she had different writing styles in this new blog. Her tone of voice was different. She had spelled things different. She used a lot more emojis, and she never did that in her old blog. So she went on to say that she was just told for a long time that she was nothing but a worthless slave. She had no safe words. Her abuse was all under the guise of this lifestyle. She had no way out of this. And that Travis basically left her no choice but to shoot him. She wrote about how she dealt with a lot of shame with this life that she had lived, trying to raise two children and move on from that slave mindset. And, a lot of people could kind of tell based on a lot of evidence in this blog that it really was Delia. And I mean, it has been proven to be her. Some people do still speculate whether she actually went through abuse or not, or if she's just lying for attention. Personally, for me, I believe her. I think the fact that she never went back to that blog, and that blog was popular, like, she could have continued that blog and kept up this lifestyle or kept up her internet fame, but she never really did. And I don't even know what she's doing now. And I think it's really important to have these conversations surrounding BDSM, whether what is truly consent and what is borderline on abuse, what is not okay. And that's where I kind of leave with this episode. I really hope I gave these cases justice, and I really hope for the victims that they have all been able to heal and know that they're more than just these sex slaves. I also hope that if anyone is listening and maybe you relate to these women, just know that it's not your fault. You didn't deserve it. And there will be links in our description for resources for sex trafficking, abuse, and rape. And with that, we'll see you guys in our next episode.